Yeah. It's my text in the chat. Yeah, but if you're okay, looks like we're recording. We have a few questions too. Okay, sounds good. All right, so the first thing that we were wondering was, what skills do you think incarcerated learners want to gain?
Definitely, writing skills is definitely a skill that many incarcerated individuals that I know want to gain. They want to increase their writing skills so that, and their verbal skills so that they can more effectively communicate with various different types of people. A lot of guys are still advocating for their release, and in order to do that, effective communication skills is, very is of paramount importance. So a lot of their advocacy process, has to do with writing. Whether it's writing an attorney, whether it's writing a nonprofit organization, whether it's writing to filing a motion, just being able to effectively like capture whatever it is that they're trying to say and convey it in a particular manner that will get the best consequences out of whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. A lot of guys, they have, good intentions. Some guys, I've met guys who was wrongfully convicted. Some guys who are innocent, but I've met some guys who are guilty, but they receive harsh sentences. Some guys are in prison and they're, subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. So many different issues that they're subjected to, but a lot of guys don't know how to like, articulate themselves, whether it's on paper or, verbally. So this is definitely a skill that I believe that the vast majority of incarcerated individuals will, really, take serious, so that's absolutely, that absolutely should be on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made some really good points there, and that's definitely the route that we are interested in taking with this program. So another question, what do you think are the biggest barriers to employment or education after release?
After release. Okay, the first one, I can tell you one, that I, experienced initially and was dealing with the DMV, trying to get your identification documents, which is your ID, or trying to get your license. So for one, it's hard to get a job if you don't have an ID. And secondly, even if you have an ID, if you don't have your learner's permit or your driver's license, it's hard to get to the job. So I think personally that two of the biggest barriers to employment are the identification card and the driver's license. So when I came out and I just addressed this issue with in a meeting, a Zoom meeting that I had with a reentry out group, and I was expressing that when I came out, I had all of the documentation that I needed to get my ID and my permit. I went in at the age of 17. However, I never had an ID before and I never had a driver's license. So I facilitated the reentry program in the Virginia Department of Corrections for approximately 4 years. So I was very familiar with the documentation. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
It's no
I'm,
problem.
I'm sorry. So I was very familiar with the documentation that we needed in order to secure our, identification card and our driver's license. So I took to the DMV. I took my social security card, my birth certificate. I had a form that's called the Offender Information on Form, of Virginia Criminal Justice Agency information form that had my picture ID up there from the Department of Corrections, which showed that I was just released. I also had 3 envelopes that showed my home address. So they said that I needed more when I went to the DMV. So they, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They said that I needed more, and I'm still learning how to cut my phone down. So they said that I needed more documentation. I didn't have it. They kicked me out of the, not kicked me out, but they told me that I the DMV, they told me that I needed more documentation. I told them I couldn't. They said that I needed specifically a bank card, a bank statement and a utility bill. So I was like, I've been incarcerated since the age of 17, so I just got out on September the 10th. At that particular assignment, I went to the DMV the next, and probably like 2 weeks later. I say, even if I was, paying bills, I haven't been out long enough to actually pay a bill. So anyway, to make a long story short, that is the biggest barrier that I personally think. There's other barriers, because without an ID, as I said, without a license, you cannot without an ID and without a license, you cannot get a job. I mean, you can't get a job without the ID, and you can't get, to and fro. You may have someone that's going to take you initially to your job. However, they may take you, but people are going, it's going to become a burden, after a while. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. No, thank you. Um, do you think that learners would be most interested in for credit or not for credit learning opportunities?
I think both. To be honest with you, most guys, hold on, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No
Most
problem.
guys, um, most guys, they are, they just want the knowledge. They're
Yeah.
interested in the knowledge, and if it's going to further them, they want it. So, but however, you do have guys like me. When I was in, I was actually trying to, like, secure my associate's degree. But while I was, in the thick of that process, I was actually taking for credit courses, and not taking courses at non-accredited universities. So
Mhm.
and also, taking those classes, what's most beneficial to those guys is able to show that they're taking the necessary steps, to become reformed and rehabilitated.
Yeah.
So if they can utilize those classes not only to, aid in the system and becoming more successful self advocates, is they can also show the governor or the courts or whoever it is that they're trying to put their case before, what they've been doing to, like, occupy their time since they throughout their incarceration.
Yeah. I think that's really good points. What are two or three things that should definitely happen in the delivery of learning within a prison?
Two or three things that should happen in the delivery. Say the last part again.
In the delivery of learning within prison. And kind of there's like a second part to this too, like what are some things you think should definitely not happen within the delivery of learning within prison?
Ah, that's a great question. If I understand the question correctly, I believe that something that should happen is that from the at the outset of the actual program or class that's being taught, that whoever's facilitating the class should receive input from the guys that are in the so that they can tell them how to best educate them.
Mhm.
And I say that because from my experience, and as I said, I facilitated many programs, in the reentry part in the DOC, is a trust issue.
Yeah.
So sometimes, that trust must be established. So if you go inside of the prisons, and you're teaching those guys, you have to interact with them and try to get to know them for who they are. So if you ask questions about, how they're doing, and, what do they expect, like these questions that you're asking me right now, what do you expect to get out of this class? And, ask them, how do they believe that they can utilize these particular tools that's being taught? These type of things, these type of conversations helps to establish, uh, the trust, so that they can better receive whatever it is that you're trying to offer them. Guys are, very mistrustful in there. And it's because guys have been harmed, so much in their lives. And in the DOC, this is the reality. So, guys, sometimes think that when someone come in to teach a class, if it's not one of them, and what I mean one of them is a prisoner or someone who has been through the experience that they've been through, then they feel that somehow it's, some type of program that's only meant to benefit the person that's facilitating, or to make the DOC look good. And that's not always the case, but this is the reality of how those guys thinking it. So if those issues aren't addressed or controlled at the outset, there's going to be a barrier right there. So we, I think that you would want to make them, not make them, but like put them in the position in a neutral place to where they can make the decision to see that whatever it is that you're offering them, they're going to benefit from it and make them want it. And a lot of guys want it, But what they don't want to receive from people that they don't trust because they believe that the people really don't care. So I think that that's one of the things that you should do and shouldn't do. What you should do is make them feel as if you want to be there and that you want to listen to, like that you care. You
Yeah,
understand what I'm saying?
no,
Did I answer your
absolutely.
question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. I think that's a really great point. I know
Yeah, so
Smut
would
has.
you, I don't know if you can hear me. Is it still hard to hear?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I was saying, is it still hard to hear? But I was just gonna say that, would you say that's the biggest barrier is like gaining that trust from like the
Yeah.
person facilitating the, and what helps? So you were mentioning just getting input. Could that be in the form of like surveys, but also like building that relationship, like that human relationship, and like the people who are actually teaching the course, like making sure they're people that the incarcerated learners would trust too.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I will say from my personal experience, even with me, when I facilitated programs in the DOC, even though I was a prisoner, still I had to develop that trust too, right? So meaning like sometimes when guys are in the classroom and they probably seem like they really don't want to participate and you can't allow it to impact you. A lot of it times is a test. So are you going to give up? Because so many people have given up on these guys. Even the system has failed them. So are we gonna when we're not getting the feedback that we think that we should receive, are we gonna just go through the motions? Are we gonna walk away and not really put our all into it? So sometimes when we continue to push through in those particular moments, this is another way that we gain those guys' trust. They just want to know that you care. They don't care is a principle that I live by. And you probably heard it before, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mhm.
So as long as you can show those guys that you care about their well-being and you're really interested in investing into them and aiding and assisting them into evolving into better versions of themselves, and that you are not a part of the system that's aimed towards harming them, for lack of a better expression. See, because I tell people, you're going to be okay. You're going to be more effective and they're going to get more out of the class. Those guys, they really want it. They need it. They want it. And when I was in there, I was released on September the 10th. One of the biggest issues in there is that those guys are not getting the programming that they feel that they need. And not only that is they're not getting programming, but then some of the programming that they're being offered, they feel like they can't use it. Guys want to know about, as I said, they want to know how to communicate. They want to know how effectively, you know, everybody communicate in some type of way, right? That was the same thing with me. I'm gonna tell you, when I started receiving classes that dealt with effective communication, I didn't get that until I entered into the cognitive community.
Mhm.
But it empowered me and gave me tools. I already knew how to communicate to an extent, but the tools that the effective communication class gave me in the seminars, it just like increased my communication level like tenfold. And I felt empowered as a consequence. So I started teaching these skills to those guys. So, but if they, sometimes it's not enough. I was teaching it in the reentry part where it was only 6 months that they had before they was released. So these skills need to be taught to the general population.
Mhm.
And I
So
listened to your homecoming speech. I don't know if you can hear me, but I listened
yes,
to your homecoming speech, and your story is so inspiring. And like I could really tell, like you were obviously the person that advocated for yourself, and like it was what you like how you communicated with others that you were able to get like your case a second consideration. So I think it's so important to extend that and like make that information available to a wider group of people, like how they can communicate more effectively. And like that's why we're interested in the writing program, and we have a few professors, like humanities professors, that I think would be great. Even like one of the professors that we're working with right now, Dr. Johnson, he's a humanities professor and he's a really skilled communicator. So I think it would be really great to have someone like that to teach the course.
Mhm.
absolutely. I totally agree. Those guys will like absolutely love that. Absolutely. And that would be great. They would absolutely love it. But not only love it, but they would benefit from it. It is a tool that they can take with them in every area of their life. They can use it in every single aspect of their life, whether it's dealing with, prison administrative officials, correctional officers, dealing with their family members, dealing with fellow inmates, having that tool, like when we're talking about curbing, violence and, lessening the recidivism rate and keeping it lower, at the heart of that is effective communication, and effective communication is directly attached to cognitive restructuring. So all of these things are of paramount importance. But I believe that if you all were to teach a particular course that dealt with cognitive restructuring, teaching people how to control their thinking,
Yeah.
because we understand this, yes, I think that that would be something that the guys will, gravitate toward. I'm also, as I said, some of these classes that deals with these particular topics, for all of them, they are specifically attached to the cognitive community for guys that are getting ready to go home, with the exception of one class called Thinking for a Change that's offered to the general population. But that particular class has so many different components. They got an advanced class, I'm Thinking for a Change class. Even when you're dealing with substance abuse issues, they got a new class called CBI Substance Abuse, which is cognitive-based intervention. And it is a new class that the Virginia Department of Corrections brought from Ohio. So every single one of these classes that I'm talking about, even when we talk about preps, preventing recidivism by educating them for parole success, and even anger management, they got a new class called aggressive management. They're getting away from those old terms, but all of these classes are directly rooted in cognitive restructuring, and at the heart of it is effective communication. Every single one of them. So, but they're not afforded to everyone in prison.
So do you think if we did a communication course, do you think it would be okay if at first it wasn't for credit? Because that's like a big, I guess, aspect that we're debating on right now. Like, should we try to aim to make this for credit or not for credit? Because if we don't do it for credit, then we'll be able to reach a lot more people just due to like financial and like funding resources. But like, I guess like a course like this, it would be mainly just for like the learning aspect and like the empowering aspect, which is just as valid as like offering credit to. I mean, they're both important, but they offer, I guess, like different types of benefits.
I absolutely agree. That's a great point. Now, I could be incorrect in this assessment, but would I be correct in saying that if it was a four credit course, then it will limit the scope of the people that the program is afforded to?
Yeah, for sure, because of funding mainly.
And also, you would have to have like a GED or a high school diploma, right?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. So a lot of guys that's in there now who would have had their GED um, over the past 2 years, they don't have it because of the pandemic. So so it's they wouldn't be able to have the opportunity to participate in the class, and they need it just as much as anyone else needed. So I believe that if you make it a not for credit class, everyone who really need it can benefit from it, because it's more so about the skills that they're going to acquire that's going to enhance their quality of life and to make them better individuals, and aid and assist them into evolving into a better version of themselves. This is what's most important, and not the actual credits they would get as a consequence of attending the course, even though that's very important too. But right now, these guys need the skills that's going to help them survive in prison, to endure, to cope, and to be able to get the most out of each and every situation, extract the most out of it, the most benefit, and, to get them further, to their goal, which is freedom, or just enhancing the quality of relationship that they have with their parents, with their wives, with their children, with their fellow inmates, or whoever. So I believe that it probably would be advantageous to make it a not-for-credit course initially.
Yeah, and I think even like that communication has nothing to do with a person's knowledge. Like you can be very smart and like very capable of great things, but if you can't communicate your thoughts and like that whole part of like English and writing, like then it's like you're never going to be able to, I guess, like communicate to others like what you're thinking and like what your story is.
Yes, I absolutely agree. As I expressed, one of my biggest issues, not getting into my story personally, but you know, to your point, when I was younger, my biggest issue was I didn't have the ability to play so they can see the emotions that I was experiencing inside so that I can effectively articulate, to whomever it was in my life that was frustrating me, that was angering me, that made me feel that they were ungrateful for me or wronging me in some type of way. I couldn't express it, but when I was able to like learn particular skills, able to identify with the emotions that I was experiencing inside and put a label on it, and I learned how to articulate that to particular people, I was, the problems, the trouble that I was getting into, diminished. I can't tell you the last time that I've been in trouble. But when I was younger, it wasn't that I was bad, it wasn't that I was evil, but my biggest issue, as I said, I had an anger problem. And sometimes when I get frustrated, I didn't know that I was experiencing frustration because I didn't understand the emotion, and I didn't have a label to put on it. And I didn't know how to express to the person that was frustrating me that they were frustrating me. So that normally resulted in some type of fight as a consequence. So
Yeah, I think that you just hit that on the head. Like you just are so well spoken around this topic. Like that's exactly what we're trying to, enforce through this program. We're trying to be able to spread these opportunities. And I really liked how you talked about trust earlier. And I know that staffing is something that we are like taking really deep consideration into for a program like this. We know that it's so important to be able to provide the right opportunities to these individuals. So I was just wondering how you think that someone could be able to establish that communication, or are there opportunities that aren't being taken for instructors to communicate with the students in these programs?
yes, yes, ma'am. That's a great question too. The reality is this: a lot of people don't care. You have those within the DOC that really do care, and I was, fortunate enough to, establish healthy relationship with a lot of those officials. There are many in there that who care, but to a lot of folks, it's just a job. So whether or not the inmate get it or don't get it, it's really not a concern of theirs. They just want to, as long as they put it out there, they don't use skill, they don't use tact, they don't try to use an approach that allow the inmates to get the most out of whatever it is that they're trying to give them. As long as they're seen on camera, standing there before the people saying something, their job is done. So now, however, you can't get too mad at the people who come there and say it's just their job and they just want to do their job and convey some information and leave if they're not being held accountable. So this is a culture. So this is a culture. So what I mean by that is this: we have to hold the people accountable. And what I say we, those who understand this toxic culture, those who see, because a lot of those guys, they try to do it themselves, but a lot of times they're not effective, right? When they write it up, when they complain, you know, a lot of times they're right. I've been on that side, it's just no one will listen. So those of us, like me, I was released from prison. I understand what goes on inside of there. People like you who care, you all who care, we have to be the ones that, put forth the effort to hold those individuals who are accountable who really don't care. Hold them accountable who don't care, meaning who's not doing their job effectively. Why do it at all? If that's what they came into the DOC to do and they're being allowed to do that, they're not necessarily wrong. And I hope it's making sense what I'm trying to say. We don't agree with it. It's wrong. But what I mean is, if that's what they signed up for and that's what they're being allowed to do, see, if we keep accepting it, they're going to keep giving it. That's how it is in our personal life. If I keep accepting abuse, then what I'm saying is that that's what I'm worthy of. I'm never going to accept anything that I deem myself unworthy of receiving. So it's up to us to do what we're doing right now. And I don't know. That's why I just commend, people like Margaret. She is so awesome. When I was in there, every time I call upon her, she is a gem. Like, she speak the truth. She don't fear the blamer. And if she can help you, she's gonna help you. She have no problem advocating for the rights of prisoners. But we need more people like that, because together we can be stronger, and together we can get a more favorable result. When you got so many, when you up against a big bureaucracy like the DOC, and I'm not even going to say that you're specifically against the DOC, because the DOC isn't the problem. It's those who are in certain positions, right, that don't care. That's the problem. I tell people all the time, when we talk about criminal justice reform and prison reform, I don't want to eradicate, the criminal justice system, and I don't want to eradicate every prison. Yes, there are too many prisons, right? But we do need the criminal justice system. I don't want to live in a lawless society, but we want to reform it and make it better. So in order to do that, we have to hold people accountable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Another question that we have is, how do you think that the challenges that come with the physical space affect the learning environment? So that's something that's been interesting to our team, how that might impact the ability to run these programs.
I believe that, the state can, more money need to be afforded towards educational advancements in Virginia. Specifically, that's what I just talked about when I spoke about eradicating many of the prisons. So I think that the funding will be available, um, specifically as a consequence of, the new bill HB 5148 that's going into effect, and which is going to allow a lot of different prisoners to be released this particular year. It's going to save the Department of Corrections or the state, millions of dollars in the years to come. But I think that this funding, if we utilize this particular funding to, implement more programming, which they are going to do, as far as like to expand the reentry program, to, hire more probation officers, and for the people that's going to be released, I think that these programming that you're talking about, they can be implemented, under that particular budget in the Virginia Department of Corrections, because it's going to help, prepare these individuals for reentry, right? Because these individuals are eventually going to go home, maybe not in the next year or so or whatever. But if we offer these particular programs, it's going to help, lower, keep the recidivism rate lower in Virginia and curb the violence inside of the prisons. So I believe that the funding is there and will be there in the long run as a consequence of this new bill that's being implemented in Virginia, HB 5148.
Another thing that we've been kind of going back and forth on is how we'd be able to facilitate technology in a program like this so that it's more accessible to more people, especially with all the COVID guidelines right now. We want to make sure that we're able to reach as many people as possible. But do you think that technology could interfere with the effectiveness of the educational process through these kinds of programs?
Yes, it can, but however, they are opening back up in the Virginia Department of Corrections. So, and they're allowing, individuals to come in to teach and facilitate programs. So I do know that. So maybe somehow it can be implemented in a way where you have the virtual opportunity as well as you have the in-person opportunity to learn, and maybe you can do it like on a bi-weekly basis, like so every individual, like one week, if you attend a class virtually, you can attend it in person the next week, somehow like that. um I don't know, that's something that I believe that can certainly be given more thought. We have to improvise and improvise, excuse me, and think about new ways to kind of like get the most out of this particular opportunity. And
What
so it will impact it, but I believe that we can find a way around it.
I was just gonna ask, what are like the most common technologies that are used in prisons, and how are they used specifically in education? If you can speak a little bit on that.
One more time, I didn't hear you.
What are the most common technologies used in prisons, and also how are they used in educational in the educational space?
But it actually, okay, one of the prisons I just left was Green Rock Correctional Center. And in Green Rock, they actually purchased a second television for each pod. And this particular television is specifically for educational purposes. So you have a television on one side of the pod where individuals can watch, television and the normal shows and movies and so on and so forth. Then they have another television for Department of Correctional Education. So just to rewind for a minute, back in 1998, I was one of the first offenders on, I don't like using offenders, but inmates on Red Onion State Prison. And at that time, there wasn't any classrooms open. But the way that we went to school over the television. That's actually how I got my GED. So we would sit in our cell and we would watch the teacher teach on the television. It was a little difficult, right? But you learn to cope with it and to get through. And I studied, and when I went and took my GED, I passed. So, but this was way before COVID. So now they're implementing those methods of learning in the Department of Corrections again. So a lot of classes is done over the television.
Yeah,
So
so
meaning you can have a teacher.
yeah,
So
I was
you will
just
have.
gonna say,
I'm
no, go
sorry.
ahead,
Go ahead.
please, please. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I didn't mean to interrupt
You
you.
okay? You
Uh,
okay?
but no, continue your thought because I think you're gonna say something about the
Oh,
television.
yeah. So they're re-implementing the Virginia Department of Corrections now. So it's effective. It's not the best form of teaching because a lot of guys need that one-on-one or that personal, you know, classroom interaction. So that they can ask a particular question if they don't understand it and have their understanding clarified if they got a misunderstanding. So one thing that we did when we was in a reentry is that we taught, this was, during the pandemic when we had to like minimize the size of the class, reduce engage in class reduction or the amount of people that we allowed to have in the class. What we started doing was we just taught two different classes, or sometimes we would teach two classes at one time, but it would be in different spaces. So it was a lot of more work, but we got the job done. So that's another option.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. So it seems like from the conversations that I've had with the DOC that it's kind of like there hasn't been much advancement. Like they're still just doing the television, um, especially in the state of Virginia. Like there hasn't been that many strides towards like offering laptops or anything like that. It's mainly still just through the television. Is that from what your experience like you've seen too?
Absolutely. I do know another option, something that could be looked into before I left. JPEG was offering a new tablet. It was a JP6 tablet, and it's supposed to be more advanced. That's another option. I know that they have the option where you can do telephone calls on that particular tablet, or video visits. So maybe there could be a way that individuals can engage in class through, like in real time, um, through the tablets. That's another option. And I think that those communications, I know that they are available on the tablet, but it's up to the different states to allow that particular technology to be available to the inmates in the state.
Just another question I did have, just going back to like the delivery of learning. Do you have any other, I guess, suggestions? And the main point you mentioned is that receiving input from learners themselves. But do you have any other, I guess, tips for when we're creating the actual content? Like how do we make it engaging? How do we appeal to the learners? Like any other tips that come to your mind?
Absolutely. One more thing that I think you all should consider is to, at every institution that you're going to teach these classes, to never underestimate the value of attaching yourself to a respected inmate in that particular facility that the people respect, to aid and assist you all in that particular process. So maybe while you're teaching, that individual is in it. It's kind of like an aid. in the cognitive community, they call them elders. So that will make it a more appealing if someone is standing with you or whom they know and they trust is another way to establish the trust of the inmates. And it makes the material more appealing to them if the individuals, if you spend time like teaching that particular individual the curriculum and have them talk about the curriculum with you, it's going to make it a little more cool, for lack of a better expression. And so that's which is already cool, but y'all understand what I'm saying. You have to use different approaches, and I think that that would be something that you all should definitely consider. And will have to be someone that's going to take it serious too, not just a individual who people respect for the wrong reasons.
Mhm.
So someone who really value education and that people respect, for their pursuits, to attain a higher education, and and they implement those certain principles that they learn in their life. So that would be very advantageous.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know mentorship has come up a lot in our conversations, just as something that kind of happens to occur in these programs and something that is essential in being able to get it going as well. So I think
Absolutely.
that's a really good point.
And also something else is certificates. This is another thing. Maybe create excuse me certificates for every single portion of the course that's being completed as they move forward. When guys can see that it's something tangible, that's encouraging. They will come back to the pod. They want to show it to their family. They want to show it to whomever it is that they deem of value in their life, and that's very important. And make them want to go and and attain another certificate, and they don't want to stop until they finish it all. So if you make it, instead of making it some type of certificate of completion at the end of the overall course, somehow create certificates for each portion of the course that they complete.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea and something that we could definitely do. I don't think I have any more questions. Samaya, have you thought of any more questions?
I think for now, this is like you've given us a lot of great information to move forward with. If you're available, we definitely would love to stay in touch, and hopefully in the future, if more questions come up, we'd love to have you as a resource and someone, especially because this is also a part of making sure that we're creating something that is actually beneficial and impactful. It's talking to people that have been through the system and like having their perspectives highlighted and front and center is really a huge value of ours. So, I know you're busy, you probably have a lot that's going on in your personal life and everything, but if you would love to like kind of continue having this conversation with us, we'd love to have you as a resource and someone that's really involved in us creating this curriculum.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate uh, how thankful we are that you're willing to have these conversations with us, because it really is so important to us that we create a program that's really beneficial and just like thoughtful to what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to create available within the system. So thank you again so much for talking to us. And we would love to stay in contact if you're ever available for further conversations.
Yes, ma'am. That sounds great. I would definitely, I'm definitely interested in staying in contact. I definitely want to have, further conversations regarding this particular topic. And I really appreciate you all, taking out your time and inviting me to this conversation and listening to my input. It was, it was warm, it was wonderful, insightful, and I look forward to, continuing this conversation with you all in the near future.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. Hope
Thank
everyone has
you.
a good day.
Have a
Or
great day.
Thanksgiving.